Okay, so in this class we'll just have a little look at audio, but we won't go into too much detail really. I just want you to see that many of the ideas that we encountered when we were looking at images also apply to audio. And in fact, in some instances, they even make more sense when you think about them in audio rather than in images. So, sound travels through the air as like compression waves, like ripples in water. And then different parts of the ear are sensitive to that. Ultimately, though, the waves are interpreted as sound then by our brain. So there's stuff that happens in our brain as well. And a lot of the really sophisticated compression algorithms exploit that. So if I was talking to you like this, and then someone came along and started cutting the grass just outside there, you know, the big noisy lawnmower they have, okay? It's entirely possible that you wouldn't hear a single thing I was saying, that all you would perceive is the lawnmower, okay? Now, if you were to have the recording of me speaking, okay, it would be possible to analyze that and see that all of the information with me speaking is still there. Like the sound waves that, you know, the compression waves that are coming out, starting with my mouth and traveling through the air and finding their way to your ears, they're still there, just as they are. Like if I'm still talking and there's a lawnmower outside the window, it doesn't change the fact that I'm still talking, right? But you can't hear it. You can't perceive it, okay? Because your brain is just hearing the noise of the lawnmower. So what some very clever compression algorithms do, in much the same way as, say, JPEG and the discrete cosine transform organizes the information in such a way that you have the most visually important and most visually unimportant pulls apart, and then you can lose the unimportant stuff. You can also have a model of how people hear and organize your compression in such a way that the information that the person wouldn't be able to perceive is lost. So let's say the part of me speaking, the information with my voice while the lawnmower was going on, was taking up some space. You know, encoding that was requiring some data. You could probably lose that data and you wouldn't notice. If you lost the information of me speaking while the lawnmower, basically, if I started just while the lawnmower was outside, you know, you would probably think I was still talking. You know, you wouldn't know that I'm actually not talking. I'm just mouthing the words. And so wasting data on that is pointless. So some compression algorithms, the really sophisticated ones, work like that. They can actually analyze the data, analyze the sound, and say, yeah, but the person wouldn't notice that anyway. So I won't even bother coding it. Which is one of the things that really annoys then people who are big into their music. You know, because they can, just as you, once you know how JPEG and know how MPEG works, you can start to see the artifacts. You can actually start to see, oh, I can see those blocks now in a way you couldn't before. Similarly, people who are big into their sound quality get very annoyed at compression algorithms. And so there's even a market for stuff that's not compressed. And there's a market for analog and everything. Okay. No, we're just going to look at some very simple, very basic concepts of the way sound is stored. We're not going to get into the compression per se. We might do it the next day, we'll see. So a microphone then converts sounds to an electrical voltage. And that voltage then is analogous to the sound wave. So if you were to see if you had a graphical representation of the compression waves traveling through the air, a microphone converts those to electrical signals, and you'd see that they rise and fall together. The electrical signal over time is an analog of the sound wave. Okay? And so when we have that in electrical form, then we can have some way of storing it. Speakers then convert that electrical signal by generating compression waves. And if you have a big bass at home, you can actually see the bass going dum, 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 dum. You can actually see it moving. Whereas the high frequency sounds, the high frequency speakers, they move so fast you wouldn't actually see them. Okay, so a microphone will go from sound to electrical signal, and then a speaker will go from electrical signal back to actual sound. Once we have a sound represented as an electrical signal, we can then start to do things with it that are interesting. So if the voltage over time or the electrical signal over time can be stored, then we can represent the sound in some way. And so magnetic tape does that, and vinyl discs can do that. So you've seen, well, or maybe you haven't, I don't know, I imagine most of you have, seen a vinyl disc at least. Not because your granny has them, but because they've made a comeback. So the wobbles and the groove then are analogous to the electrical signal. Presumably there's only one groove. So it's just a spiral. It's not concentric circles, it's one spiral. And you start at the outside and work your way and move towards the middle. So if you look at it kind of really, really close, basically the needle moving left to right can give you a representation of the sound. Okay. So if you could sort of sit on the needle, you would see, it would look like you were kind of flying through a ravine. But it wouldn't be dead straight ahead. You'd be going left and right. So imagine it's kind of like you're in an X-wing fighter or something, going really, really fast through a fjord. You're going left and right, and that gives you an analog of the signal. Now it turns out actually though that stereo is a bit more complicated. We'll look at that in a second. Magnetic tape then did much the same, except you had these tiny little kind of magnetic miniature magnets almost. And you could magnetize them, in a different direction. And the extent to which you had it magnetized, the extent to which where north was pointing, would give you an analog for the signal. And you could on the same tape have different tracks. And so you could have 4 tracks or 8 tracks. So there was a format many years ago, 8-track tape, where you might have, the guitar on one track, the drums on another track, the vocals on another track, background singers on another track, and you could independently, increase and decrease the volume of those, which was great fun. It wasn't a format that didn't last. I had a buddy in college who had a 4-track recording machine. You could put in a regular tape, and you could do 4 different tracks. You could do your drum track, and then come back and do your guitar track, and then come back and do your vocals, and then maybe come back and add some harmonies to those. You do all that now in like GarageBand or something like that. You wouldn't actually use tape, but before it was all digital, that was what you had to do. So strong magnets then can damage a tape. There's I think it's in The Big Easy, there's a guy gets videotaped committing a crime, and the tape is in the evidence locker, and so you see him smashing a window with this big huge metal thing. You don't know what's going on, and it turns out the big huge metal thing is a giant magnet. And so because that was evidence of a crime, they put that in the evidence locker next to the tape, and so the tape is wiped and he gets off, and this is all simply engineered. But I digress. Now, humans have 2 ears. So in the last class we were looking at stereo vision, and we were looking at how you can send a different image to each eye. Well, because we have two ears, we can perceive sound in stereo. The main reason for that is we can tell then where a sound is coming from. So I can tell, sound over here, sound over here. If I was to get you all to close your eyes, and I was to click either my right finger or my left fingers, you could probably tell which, just because the distance between my arms is so wide, you could probably tell which one's that. I want to close your eyes for the laugh. So which ones was it? So my left, this one or this one?
Your left.
My left, yeah. Easy peasy. So if I was your lunch, making noise in the bushes, you could tell where I was, so you could go eat me. Okay? Music in stereo sounds more realistic. I know it sounds more realistic. What's realistic when it comes to music? But it certainly sounds more interesting to have something in stereo than in mono. Okay? So for stereo recordings, then you have two microphones, or you have a microphone unit with two microphones built in. And typically, you have them a distance apart a bit. And so then you have two separate sound channels instead of one. And then when you have your speakers, then you have two speakers, or you have two speakers in your ears for headphones. You get a different sound then delivered to each ear. Stereo is interesting from a compression point of view because, as you can imagine, if you had a recording of me speaking now, the difference between the left channel and the right channel would be very, very small. There'd only be tiny differences. So a lot of compression algorithms will exploit that fact, and coding a left channel and a right channel typically wouldn't take up twice the space of coding just the left channel. Because the difference between left and right is so tiny, you can exploit the similarities and code them that way. With tapes, stereo kind of was easy enough. You had just space on the tape anyway, so you had a left channel and a right channel. So in your regular Philips cassette tape, you had 4 tracks. You had a left and a right, and then you could turn it around, and side A and side B, and have left and right as well. But there was space for 4 separate soundtracks there. Discs then, though, a bit tricky, like, if you think about it, with a vinyl disc, it's not like you've got 2 needles. Think about it, you don't. That would have been one approach to take. Have a spiral, have 2 spirals and 2 needles. Wouldn't have been backward compatible though. So how do stereo discs work? It's kind of interesting. It turns out that with a mono disc, you're just talking about going from left to right. So if you're in your X-Fighter, flying through the ravine, you're just going from left to right, turning left to right. But in reality, of course, you can move up and down and left and right. And so stereo discs consider the diagonal movements for the left and right channels. So you're moving not just in one plane, in one direction, you're moving in 2 directions. And so you can code the stereo that way, which is kind of interesting. Okay. So what about digital audio then? So we're all familiar with compact discs, although even they are starting to fade away a bit. You notice that the logo for iTunes used to be a compact disc, but now it's not anymore because music doesn't necessarily equal compact disc anymore. So audio can be represented digitally, and as we know from everything in this module, digitally just means being stored using numbers. It doesn't necessarily mean better quality. It often does. And one of the reasons in audio it often means better quality is because when something is represented using just numbers, well, you can make perfect copies of those numbers. And of course, the ability to make perfect copies of music has led to all manner of issues and changes in the way things are done. Okay? But we're interested in how that electrical signal might become digitized. So this isn't a very sharp image here. Oh, actually, screen quality is, your screens are quite shabby today. Sorry, didn't realize that. But basically, you have a signal that is varying over time. And as with any value then, over time, you can have a number of quantization levels and a sampling rate. And those two things are going to affect then the quality of the digital representation. So you can sample very, very often, or you can sample less frequently. And then each sample then also can be represented using more or less quantization levels. So many of the things we did with images, with colors, with pixels, we can do with sound also. So CD quality audio uses 44.1 kilohertz, or 44,000 samples per second, and 16 bits for each sample. Now, on top of that, though, there's compression going on as well. 22 kilohertz, 16 bits per sample is pretty good. If you were, say, going to the gym, 22 kilohertz, 16 bits is probably fine for music in the gym, you know. And remember that it would be half the size, so you'd get twice as many songs. But 8 bits per sample tends not to be so good. So once audio then is in digital form, it can be, you know, edited, cut and paste very easily. It can be edited, it can be modified, you can apply filters to it. You can generate perfect copies, which as we know is an issue. I'll just have a look there now. We can have a look at some of the software that does that. You may have done this at home anyway, yourself. Let's have a look there now. So, get some space. So, this here is a piece of software called Audacity, which is free. And it does a pretty good job of doing most of the things you would need to do. If we zoom in really, really close, you can see the actual waveform then. So here now we're looking at actual, actual samples. Okay, which is a bit insane. Let's zoom out. Is there an easier way to do that? So we can zoom in here. So if we just play this here.
Für Deutsch wählen Sie 1.
That was just some awful thing there that I found. I didn't want to take. Well, actually, this software has a problem opening MP3s, and also all of my music is stored in a different format again, so I couldn't just take something that I had handy. I could have taken something off a CD conveniently, except this machine doesn't have a CD drive anymore. So, no. What I wanted to show you was we're going to change this so that it's just mono. How do I do that? Stereo track to mono. So now it's just mono.
Für Deutsch wählen Sie.
You won't hear much difference. What I want to do is I want to resample it. At the moment it's 44 kilohertz at 32 bits per sample. I want to resample it, halving the sample rate and halving the number of bits per sample. And we want to hear the difference, okay? So just make a few copies. So we are going to take it from 44 kilohertz to 22 kilohertz. Just need to resample that there now. Resample. So we'll go down to 22. Let's see if we can hear much of a difference. course, you are hearing this through my speakers, which...
Für Deutsch wählen Sie 1.
I found it very hard to hear the difference there between the two of those. Okay. What we'll do now is we'll go even further. And we'll go down to we'll go all the way down to 8 kilohertz, okay? And we should hear a difference there now.
Für Deutsch wählen Sie 1. Für Deutsch wählen Sie 1.
You hear that? When you go down to 8 kilohertz, which is very extreme, it's kind of sounded kind of just a bit muffled. Right? It's not noisy, it's just kind of a little bit muffled. Right? So that's the effect of reducing the sample rate. Now, obviously 8 kilohertz is crazy low, but I just wanted you to hear the effect of that there. Let's make a few more copies now of the clean one. So we'll resample this using fewer bits per sample now. We won't have many choices of that actually. Oh, okay. It's not even giving me that option, is it? How do I do that? Mix and render. What that does? No. File, new, let me see there now. See if I can do that. That's the sample rate. Export. Options. Sorry, no. Used to be able to do that very easily. That's a pity now. I can't figure that out. But what happens when you start reducing the number of bits per sample is it doesn't get muffled. It starts to get a bit noisy. You start to hear like a bit of crackling. You know, you can hear the noise starting to hiss in the background. There are also some really cool things you can do actually removing noise. Software like this allows you to you could take a recording of this class, for example. And can you hear that? I guess it's a bathroom fan or something going outside, right? If I was silent for a while, that was still going, right? You can take a sample of the noise and the software will analyze what the noise sounds like. And then you can apply that to the whole file and it'll subtract the noise. So you could conceivably, if the noise is regular enough, if the noise is uniform enough. So if there was the lawnmower outside, you could sample the lawnmower when I'm not talking and then get the software to subtract the lawnmower noise from the overall thing. And it's really impressive when it works, you know. So you can have a look at that. So I think there's Audacity in the labs if you want to have a go with that and mess around with it. No, can't find the thing I was looking for there now, unfortunately. But there's a big difference. So you can reduce this, you can halve the size of a file by halving the sample rate or the number of bits per sample, and you'll have different effects when you do that. Any questions on any of that? Okay, so this won't be on the exam. I might in the next class, the next lecture class, whenever that is, look at some of the ways audio is compressed. But for the practical labs, we will work on getting your assignments sorted. And then I would say after next week we'll be sort of in tutorial mode, where it'll just be going through possible exam questions and sorting them out. Because it's 80% exam at the end of the day. So you want to be getting your studying done. It's an exam module, really. The way that'll work is you will come along with questions and I will answer them. Don't turn up expecting to be entertained. If you don't have a question, nothing will happen. Obviously, if you don't have a question, someone else has a question, you learn from the other person's question, but I won't be bringing the questions. I'll only be bringing the answers. And also, it doesn't work if you sort of don't get the whole thing, some people say, oh, I can't do it, and I go, well, what part don't you get? He says, I don't get any of it, I can't do any of it. Well, that doesn't, I can't work with that, So you need to figure out at what point it doesn't work for you anymore, and then we get you to the next point. If you can't do anything after, hello, my name is Colin, then it doesn't, it's no good to us. Okay? So, by now you should have all the past exam papers. They're good examples of the kind of questions you'll have. So yeah, any questions? Oh, cute. Okay, we'll leave it there so for today.